Um, I've got some. I shared it in the yesterday you extended the feedback to today on that issue. I Wait, can you be able to hear me with this thing? I'm never
Yeah,
sure
we
whether
got
it's
you. We got
working
you.
or not.
I'll start hollering if we lose you.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yep, sounds good. Can
Hello,
you
hello.
can you hear
Oh,
me?
okay. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the error is mostly almost all the time on my side. Yeah, I shared some thoughts on the I mean, it's not really that much on the issue if I can find it. The issue ticked. Oh, um, okay, it's proving to be a little bit. Oh, there we go. Um, Yeah, actually, I'll just share the link to the copy link. Yeah, it was just kind of trying to get a little bit of clarification about the balance of how much we want to strike the specific PBL format of the accreditation, and how much we'll be thinking about sort of like an open, like basically like for this first version, yeah, how, like, what does that balance look like? um and then with regards to completion, I was just thinking, um in the proposal it says it will live within the metadata, but I was just wondering what the relationship between, like, is there, yeah, like, what's our thinking in terms of that relationship, like, because I can see, some people opting to sort of be token heavy and metadata like light, or like metadata defining stuff within metadata a lot more and a lot less within tokens, which are within the transaction. um yeah, so yeah, just wondering about that. And then the final one was just yeah, yeah, the image, the ideas behind the image, whether there are any constraints, or sort of like a framework of how to maybe you know think about the thing, whether prominence should be given to gimbal and its logo, or to to other aspects of the thing, and also mediums as well. So like, I briefly, what makes me wonder, yeah, yeah, um yeah, so I was just reading James's thing there. Yeah, I quickly mentioned in the Discord that I've been having some ideas with regards to representation of this kind. Mine kind of takes form of it takes form in 3D. I've got some ideas there which I'll just like give some some more context to a bit later on.
That's awesome. That's a great place to start. Thanks, Dave. Alex and Nelson, how about you? Oh, Alex, I see you're unmuted, but we're not getting sound from you.
And
Or
like
you.
so, like so.
Hey, gotcha. Yeah.
Okay, there's a button on the headphone. So I'm just a little bit not up to speed with this conversation, and I was just wondering, remember we were talking about multi-sig contract for the bouncing treasury, and if it fits this discussion or it doesn't fit, because like, should I push in this direction or just sit and listen?
Excellent. Oh, yeah, perfect. Thanks for asking about that. The multi-sig treasury is absolutely a high priority and not quite for the scope of this one. Okay. But yeah, we do have to come back to that because GBTE is only so useful if it doesn't have that multi-sig treasury capability.
Okay, then now I sit and listen, and then sometime later we talk about multisig, okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to stick around after this session if you want to just compare some notes on that too, if we have time.
Oh, for sure, man. Like, I'm just gonna then maybe do some stuff and listen, and then join the conversation.
Good deal, thanks. Nelson, how about you?
Hi guys. Uh, so to James' question about who the metadata is for, I have thought about this before, and it's not a solution for now. But I have thought about creating an NFT minting app, sort of that way. And the way it does is like DALL-E, that thing. It just gets the text and creates an image. The way like that, if we want to, for example, if we are to as an institution, if we were to give certificates as NFTs, then at that time we can create an app that mints an NFT with the image that has been processed using the metadata. So we just give it the metadata, and according to the metadata, it might be having different persons' names, and that translates into the NFT image by itself, the app itself, and sort of like that. It's not an immediate solution, but I have thought about this before. Just wanted to share that.
That's incredible. That's a really good idea, right? So it's if there was some template, for example, for the image, but then at minting time, a unique copy of the image was made with a name like that on it. That's an incredible idea. And it makes me think, so there's these three pieces of data that people can see, right? They can see whatever's in the metadata, and they can read that to find out about the token. They can look at the name of the token if the token name means anything, and we're going to talk about that today. But a lot of people, it's true, the image really is important, right? It builds up the UI for this thing. And so if that image was really unique in some way to the holder, the person who completed the course, that's a really cool idea. And so I actually, you probably know more than I do about automating that process, but let's write a bounty for that. Let's make that a task, because I think there's real value in exploring that option. Thanks. Anybody else just have ideas that you've been walking around with and want to start by sharing? I tried to encapsulate some of what I've been thinking about since yesterday, along with A's comment here and Badi's comment here. And so just to reframe these outcomes, and I know that Trevor and Alex, we missed you yesterday, so to catch you guys up, right? Part of what I recognized I wanted to be more clear about yesterday is that this is a first instance of a tool, right? And the beautiful thing that happens when we start talking about tools like this is our brains explode. My brain explodes when I think about, oh my God, if we do this first thing, what are we going to do next? And it's so exciting. It makes it hard to sleep sometimes, but I have to bring myself back and say, well, still, what's the first thing? There's a million places I want to go. How do I do the first thing right in a way that will keep as many of those million options open as possible? And so I really want to focus in on this idea that here we are for this initial course completion token. And one way to measure the success of our project is that it keeps open opportunities for other people, right? If we do this right, it should inspire people and empower them to take what we've done here and say, hey, I really like it, but I want to do this part different or that part different. And this applies to both the completion token, which is about specifically completing the PPBL course. And the same is true about the first instance of GBTE, right? If this thing works, other people will say, oh, okay, I can grab that open source code and I can make another instance and I can keep the rules that I like and I can change the rules that I want to experiment with. So yesterday was really helpful to me to experience, being in that space of huge ideas and lots of potential, while also feeling the pull to come back and say, okay, but what is the focused outcome here? And so I hope that these outcomes make sense. Our job is to make a first instance that does this one thing and that then makes it possible to do the next thing. Any feedback on these outcomes, or does that make anybody else think about other implications?
Well, to be honest, here I'm quite contrarian, to everyone. And to me personally, what is inside matters much more than the token that I would receive for completion if I was to complete the course. So it's like, I don't know. For me, the idea was just, the completion token could just be referral to the name of Gimbal Labs. And like if you get a diploma from university, it has the name on it and it carries some weight, and this already is great. And then there's not so much even metadata involved in that, you just need a referral that, and this already is in the token, because it has the Minter address, and Minter address is known, to be Gimbal Labs. And yeah, so it's like, I don't really understand how I can add anything to this. I'm listening, and if I can find something like meaningful to say, it'd be awesome. But for now, it's just like I was kind of away from this conversation a little bit. And of course, yeah, some ideas are super nice. For example, this with the automatic generation of art on the token with the AI, it's awesome. But for me personally, if I did this, would be more awesome that I was actually doing this, because it's some interesting new exciting tool that could be, I personally could use, and to build something on that, but for example, what should be included, as we discussed before, I just lack the perspective, to really have an opinion on like what should be included in the metadata for the completion token. It's like, for me, like, like with the why is Raven like a writing desk, I have no slightest idea.
We got you. So I think it's good to get into the details, and I'm sure, Alex, you'll have some ideas about that. Trevor, what do you say? Oh, I don't know if you're talking.
Yeah, so there we go. There we go. I got it now. I always forget to hit the unmute there. Yeah, I was just going to chime in with a couple of thoughts. I think the clarification of like this is just a first instance is super helpful for me. And I tend to think in terms of like there's a point at which you've got to just like go and start solving problems. I'm not so much a move fast and break things kind of person, but at a certain point, you'll never solve all the problems that you'll solve once you start using. And so for me, I a little bit agree with what Alex was saying, as far as like, we've got what's needed, bare basics, you know, almost a diploma kind of amount of information there. And if the goal is then to start using and make it usable by other people who can, you know, adapt and add to it and things like that, then I think the most important things are going to be to get the ball rolling. And then you can use the GBTE to have bounties for things like really good documentation, or potentially even, you know, video documentation of how someone might implement it, you know, making it really easy for other people to build on and implement their own and things like that. And if at some point, you know, you discover we want to add something that, you know, doesn't, the current smart contract or the current front end doesn't allow for, like tokens that have already been minted, you know, could still be honored and reminted under a new system if we get to that point. But I think what's there is honestly really awesome. Some of the discussion that happened last week must have, you know, I mean, I think definitely clarified some things, and some of the things that, you know, we've chatted about in the forums. In my opinion, I think it's in a pretty good spot, at least a good enough spot to start a first instance and start experimenting with things. So I'm excited about it personally.
Trevor, thanks. And thanks for that context too. I appreciate that. Curtis, regarding burn mechanisms, I think this is great. And both of the options you're suggesting are in play here. So one option, if these tokens are burnable in a way that allows them to be upgraded for some other token, the way I look at it is we don't want to prevent that possibility, right? What we would like to do is leave open the possibility to burn these and upgrade them. And in the very same way, versioning as well, right? So changing the minting metadata from the default version 0, if you specify in the metadata this is a later version, then that metadata will change. In both cases, the technical thing we have to do is leave the minting policy open, right? So this will not be a closed minting policy like you would want for something like a gimbal token or an NFT collection. If we leave the minting policy open, that allows us to burn or rewrite metadata in the future. So I maybe we should put that in writing, that should be one of the requirements of the token. Hey, what do you say?
Yeah, just to hop back a little bit to what Nelson was saying. It's a neat idea. However, like I would add some color to the idea. There's a lot of criticism, you know, within the, I suppose, artistic community of, you know, of all these tools, which are, you know, whether it's DALL-E or, you know, the open source version of it, from Eleuther and others. You know, there's a whole conversation taking place about what the nature and the value of these machines versus a human doing it. So I think, you know, there's value in sort of thinking about that, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here, the equivalent to what this idea will be doing is creating a visual version of a unique hash, right? A hash is to be understood by machines, not by humans, right? So in this case, you'd be taking you know, some prompts and then creating a visualization, which then humans are able to parse a lot quicker, right? Just see it visually. Oh, okay, yeah, that's that, right? And instead of going through a whole string of numbers, it's equivalent to, like, on money, how, you know, there's like images of nature and or passports as well. Yeah, to the human they look beautiful, but actually technically they serve the purpose of counterfeit mitigation, right? There's a whole bunch of watermarking going on, you know, through all these images or illustrations. So yeah, I would be critical of just taking any old um, prompts or input to then have like a some random visualization happen. I think a possible good solution here would be to engage with artists, writers, to to maybe even like form something like a short story for, I don't know, for a particular season or something, which characters or whatever can then be minted into a thing. So there's actually a story and sort of like I don't know, like a visual layer going on here, which actually goes towards, hey, here's a human who's like, articulated this story, and maybe even these characters who are embedded into all these different visualizations of the certificates, and so on. And yeah, within this there's some stuff that we can obviously learn from password chaos, and the stuff that the gimbal folks did earlier on that. Yeah, that's it. I just want to sort of quickly share some stuff around that.
Plus one, yeah, so for anybody who's not aware of password chaos, I think it was a really interesting idea that Gimbal Labs took on a year ago, but strategically it was a massive miscalculation because those of us who wanted to be learning the real utility of Cardano got distracted by thinking about ways to build systems for generative art. And then we built the whole thing, and then we realized that none of us were actually interested in marketing it, which is such a critical part of NFTs. So just from personal experience, I want to advise everybody in thinking about the visual elements of an NFT. It's so wonderful to think about. And each of us has to think about how much of a priority it is, right? Do you want to take time away from, for example, learning how Plutus V2 works to build an image system? There's no right answer to that question, right? Each of us has to decide that on our own, but it's critical just to be thinking about that. And one of the ways I've come personally to think about it is I want to create utility in tokens so that somebody with those artistic skills, maybe even all the technical skills we need to generate something, says, oh, heck yeah, I want to contribute the visuals for that, right? It would be, if we got somebody that excited who already knows how to do that stuff, so that anybody here who actually wants to prioritize something else can continue on that route. I think it's just an interesting way to think about the goals. Hope that makes sense. And yeah, just a little bit of history. Gimbal Labs got ridiculously distracted a year ago by some of these questions. All right, let's, oh, Nelson, go ahead.
Oh, just I wanted to expand on that for just some more lines. Just instead, like the system we have now, instead, if we think a little bit further and not think about NFTs and like NFTs, but still not the current standard, but for certifications, then for the current NFT standard, we have this image source, which is a URL. But if we have a standard for only for certifications, then all the data contains in the metadata, and it doesn't have to have any visual element to it. So there will be a whole lot of third-party applications that gets the metadata and render the certificate in whatever style they want. So that can be a thing, I think so. Just wanted to
That, I mean, so I mean, nobody has I'm not aware of anybody who's just straight up applied the unsig model yet, but Nelson, what you're saying, I love it. And providing data that other people can pass through an algorithm to turn it into an image with that data, that's really cool too. All right, so let's let's assume that the visual part of the conversation is ongoing, and we have to come back to it in a few moments anyway. But just to get into the proposal, yesterday we covered, for the most part, these first two parts. So following yesterday's model, let's work through these once again and see if we can get to the end of the list today. We'll go as far as we can. Okay, so ownership, this plan changed a bit yesterday. And here's what it says now. The way to earn a token is by completing the course. And we have to decide on what completion means. And the proposal says what completion means is doing all three of the onboarding and BBK assignments, plus either one of these two options. Either doing the first two leveled mastery assignments on all of the 300 level modules, or doing all 4 mastery assignments on at least one of them. Obviously, in both cases, students can choose to exceed those requirements. Does anybody have any outstanding questions, whether it's about, the viability of this solution, or even just for the clarity of how it's written here? Any comments, questions, or objections on this? Alex, yeah.
Well, to be honest, I have second thoughts on. I was meaning to say this for a while, but it's like I'm really not sure. That if what I'm thinking is kind of, because when I started learning some time ago, I've read an article which was stating that online courses have an issue of a very little % of people who start them really complete them, even if they pay for them. And so there's like one good thing in what you ask of the students is that it really is how to say well, it covers everything, and if a student completes and has the completion token, you can be sure that they know the fundamentals. And so here maybe we should experiment, and try different cohorts, because to find the balance, between how many students, like what percentage of students who start the course will complete the course and get the tokens, and on one side, and on the other side, of those who have completion tokens, how many will be successful in the working place. And so as far as I see, like, we have here already discussed that I am a very kind of, spread around person, and I don't really focus on one thing at a time, even if it's a course, like, which is diverse. And some approach is that to focus and to complete a course and have a set of knowledge. And so this is very, it's like, I was depending on the, on the situation. I was looking at this, yeah, no, this is asking too much. But then, like, no, that's actually gives good basics, for the people who come. If there's some younger guys and they don't know anything, like, it would be awesome if they completed this, and then they are already good, can be asked to do wholesome things. So I cannot say that I object to this, but I think we should kind of think about maybe, and in this, like, have A/B testing, maybe, like make one cohort do this and another cohort do that, and then check on the students and see how they fare and which approach works better. Do we make stricter rules and the completion token is more wholesome, or do we relax the rules and just allow more students to complete, and then, yeah, they have less skills and they are not as solid, but then they learn on the job, and then, so you understand what I mean?
Yes, yeah, completely. And so one thing I'm wondering is could it be that this requirement of 2 is sufficient for that? Maybe. And then, of course, the other thing you're saying reminds us all, This is the first instance. And what does it mean that it's the first instance? Well, it implies that there have to be other ones. And so definitely everybody here should expect to try other experiments. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah, just to ask a clarifying question after what Alex just said. Is the intention here, because the first place my mind went is a previous reference which I've made, I think maybe a few days ago, which was the gaming industry is a really good reference, right? Over the last few years, gaming has gone from being dominated by consoles to being dominated by like basically iOS, like Apple's casual gaming, right? And here, success, I'm talking about success in terms of the amount of use and money generated, right? For both of those metrics, like mobile gaming is just dominating ridiculously. And obviously the difference here is one is really accessible and the other one isn't really accessible. So the question here, the clarifying question here is, within what context are we talking about, and what's the intention? Is it to be accessible? So like in the context of here, of this the completion token, right? Because there's that, and then there's GBTE, the different levels, right? That we're kind of talking or that are within the sphere of conversation, but more specifically here we're talking about the completion aspect. So with the completion aspect, obviously we need to talk about like whether the expectation to get folks engaged in understanding Plutus is to be accessible or to be quite constrained, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, it is, yeah, like what, where I, I think either way, either is fine. I think we just kind of need to, well, I mean, I have a particular opinion with regards to feedback loops and incentives and that kind of thing, but I'm just curious, like, because I feel like once we have that, then there can be some clarity on what ought to sort of happen moving forward.
Anybody else got thoughts on that? Good, yeah, so I think that clarity is essential A. So this token represents that a person completed the PPBL course. That's the number one purpose of this token. Last Friday, when we talked about, for those people who were able to make it, and so if people have opinions about this, we should talk about this. But when we talked about it last week, one of the first questions was, hey, this course completion token, can it be the same thing as the initial contribution token? And we decided collectively that the answer was yes. Let's use this initial completion token to unlock access to the first instance of the GBTE. And here's why. These tasks right here, yes, they are going to pay real gimbals and real ADA. But they are also one of my problems personally with existing bounty systems is that people often start working on a bounty and they're in a race with other people who are working on it, and whoever does it first or successfully completes it first gets that. And I would like to suggest, with the way this GBTE is built, an alternative to that. I don't want people to be racing to do something because they're not sure, they're not actually sure if they're going to get funded. I would like to create a way for people to say, hey, I commit to that. And if I meet some requirements, I will get paid. And this right here, this is still a learning task, right? This, Alex was talking about the opportunity to keep learning. This bounty right here is going to be open to as many people as who want to complete it. If Gimbal Labs spends 2,000 ADA because 100 people do this task, that's okay. Okay. That's the idea. This is still a learning task at this stage. Now, there's going to be future instances of other GBTEs where the rules are different. Maybe there's an even higher barrier to entry because the bounties are more technical, more specialized. And so for those, perhaps the rules would have to be different, and that would require a different contribution access token. But this one, the reason I'm bouncing over to this right now is just to show why last week we thought, okay, let's start by making them one and the same. Now, what happens after that? Let me just skip ahead down to here for just a second. This token will allow people to commit to and be paid for completing bounties in the first instance of GBTE that goes on mainnet. Later, when other issuers create new instances, those issuers will get to set the rules for how their contribution tokens are minted. Some might say, hey, you know what? That PPBL completion token is enough. I'm just going to use that policy ID when I create my instance. But others will say, you know what? I need something more than what PPBL contribution token represents. And so I'm going to look for maybe the mastery levels on those, and only people who have a level 4 on everything, for example, would be able to either mint a different contribution token like it says here, or maybe we even look at the minting metadata for the token and we have rules about that. This is common. So, Genius Yield just released NFTs, and they all have the same policy ID, but one of the parameters in the metadata is like a bonus interest rate. And they're going to be able to reference that minting metadata and use it to some real utility in the DEX they're building. We could do the same thing here, right? You can look at the mastery levels in the data about a token, and then you could base contract logic or front-end logic on that. And of course, what we're trying to do here is create a space where other folks can come and take that opportunity to write their own rules. So this is a critical point, and we can't move forward until everybody feels clear about this. So please, like A just did, keep asking about this. And I'm going to try it again. This token is the first instance of a contribution token. It represents completion of the PPBL course. And as a founder of Gimbal Labs, I have a vested interest in this token having some integrity, meaning something, meaning that somebody did something that can reasonably be called completion on the PPBL course. That's first and foremost. So section 1 right here is, hey, these parameters, is that sufficient? Could a reasonable person look at these parameters and say, yep, if you do this plus this or this, is that completion? If so, we can move on. So I want to ask everybody for all the questions necessary to get to the point where we understand, first of all, this is the purpose of this token, first and foremost. It represents PPBL course completion. And as such, these are the rules for getting one. Okay, so Trevor and then Curtis and anybody else who has clarifying questions.
There's been like a lot of discussion on like, you know, kind of surrounding what you were just talking about, James, like, are the requirements too rigorous? Like, will people complete it? You know, so on and so forth. Like, you know, should we require everyone to have full completion before they get a token? And from my point of view, I think the question becomes at that point, what is the purpose of the course, right? If the purpose is just to get people interested in learning more Plutus, then it's probably too rigorous because there's a lot of things in here. But from my perspective coming in, the idea was kind of, and you know, obviously, James, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the idea was kind of to get people to the bare minimum of being able to contribute to a Plutus-based, you know, project, right? So like almost the open source version of an intern level at that point. And for me, coming in with practically zero web development experience, zero Haskell, zero Plutus, very little even just in Cardano CLI, I feel like the finishing the course, I mean, probably even closer to option one than option two is really the only way you're going to accomplish that, being able to do anything that's even somewhat meaningful for contribution. And if that's the case, then I don't think, you know, if this is a completion token, then the course being too rigorous isn't, you know, that's not even a question. If the point of completing the course is being able to contribute in some meaningful way, even at a bare minimum, then watering down the course or the requirement is only missing the point of the course in the first place. So for me, if it's going to be a completion token, I don't think we should walk it back any from where it is, if not even walk it forward a little bit. But you know, that's just based on my understanding of what the course is intended to be and my personal thoughts on it. So I'm interested in what everybody else has to say about that. But that's my personal perspective, is if it's a completion token, you know, that's kind of how you should approach it, is what's the point of the, you know, what's the point of the course?
I agree, and it's making me wonder. I have to go back and check Canvas and all the messaging we've done, because yeah, this message has to come through loud and clear. The reason we're doing this course is we want to prepare people to contribute to projects on Cardano. So I actually fully agree with Trevor. Curtis, what do you think?
So when you made those comments, like somebody comes here and it needs to represent value of contribution or value of knowledge learned, and they come here to see this is the requirements for the certificate or the completion token, do they actually understand what value that it provides? And if I had never taken this course, I don't think I would understand what was involved with 301. I mean, even using those descriptors that you have below, you know, pulling from the faucet or unlock from the faucet and customize style of query. It's somewhat descriptive, but to be honest, like if I have never taken that course, I may not know all that's involved. Did they write a Plutus script? Are they using Cardano CLI? Did they use a front-end integration? And these are some of the things, if I was hiring or putting up a bounty and I want to determine what minimum skill level was required for this, those are the kinds of things I would be looking for. Are you proficient in Cardano CLI? Are you proficient in Haskell or Plutus? Do you specialize in on-chain or off-chain? So some of those types of terms need to be, I think, in my opinion, described somewhere. So something like you mentioned before, James, with your master policy, if that does break down what was included in 301, I think that's sufficient. But if your question is, by just reading this one page, do they get a full idea of what is included in that knowledge base? My opinion is you would only know if you took the course, kind of.
I love that. Yeah, you're exactly right. So we will need to, and that's the place in my mind that it goes. And so I actually just added a note here. If I refresh, like Curtis said, where we post a mastery policy, wherever it is, and I'll draft it here and ask for approval from folks here before we even think about minting something with this as the URL, right? But I agree. This page has to show the objectives and learning targets, which are already there in Canvas. It's a cut and paste job. And then showing the topics covered so people can say, okay, if I see these mastery levels, here's at the very least what I know people did by getting to these mastery levels. Now, this future where a lot of other projects can look at this and see some value in it, I think that's hopefully where all of us can imagine this going. And we also have to think about the process to get there. My instinct on that is, hey, let's find out, right? Let's find out if this is sufficient first internally by saying, okay, these are the initial rules. People who do these things can contribute to the initial set of tasks. And let's make sure that's happening, right? Before we go out there and we say, okay, look, people got this credential from Gimbal Labs, we can also have a log of the success of that credential, and we can tweak our own understanding. There might be some bounties up that everybody's able to do, and we'll say, okay, we sufficiently prepared people for those things, but there's another bounty that maybe nobody takes on, or people take on, but they struggle with it. And that's going to be feedback to the course to say, we could probably do a better job preparing people for that bit. I would love if that solution happened. And once that's going on, we're going to be able to point to, hey, not only can we show you what this means, but we can show you that the holder of that token, and here this is not pretty yet, but we're able to view all transactions by the name of the contributor token, right? So this is a nameless one right here. But let me scroll down to something more helpful, right? We're going to be able to say, look, this contributor token has left this trail of transactions here. And so it's going to be both this, hey, here's what we could tell you about how we made these, plus here's the record of results for that particular contributor token, and we get to build, right? This is one of the things I'm really excited to play around with. What would the dashboard look like that shows the on-chain transaction data that illustrates the viability of these tokens, right? We don't know if we don't know if we're going to have that data. I sure hope we do. And if we do, it's going to be one hell of a story to tell, but we have to get that first, right? We have to deliver that result. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for the clarifications. I suppose I've just got one further one that I've just been thinking about. By tying both together, I feel like, and again, I'm not one to just sort of go round and round in circles, and to the point where you kind of just handicap yourself and don't do anything. But I think it is worth just acknowledging, or sort of speaking to, in making commitments now, what ramifications that could have, as you asked, at the beginning of this whole conversation, what ramifications our actions today have on on future actions. So if the bar to actually get to be acknowledged as a contributor within Gimbal is to hey Dagwell, is to complete PPBL. In a way, the assumption there is that moving forward, that Plutus will be a core thing that if you want to be acknowledged as a contributor on any level within Cardano, you know, from a GBTE standpoint, like that is the ring, you know, the bar to be crossed, right? And as more and more primitives get, you know, manifested into scripts, as we've kind of spoken about, the idea that, you know, more and more Plutus devs will be needed will kind of become, you know, it won't really be the case. So, you know, it might end up being like, you know, something, you know, a DSL, whether it's Marlow or, you know, other types of DSLs. And so in this case, you might have some weird conflict in people who, you know, had to have a higher level or sort of requirements to be what's the word, to be um, acknowledged or recognized as contributors, and then people tomorrow are seen to be having lower standards, right? This whole thing like affects, you know, a whole bunch of different environments, like the army, for example, where the entry requirements just, you know, going down and down, right? So yeah, I'm just curious whether tying these two makes sense in the context of, you know, thinking about things as we move forward. Hope that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I'm just, yeah, I just want, yeah, some
Yeah.
thoughts around. Yeah, thanks.
No, it absolutely does make sense. And so to elucidate my mental model here, I see this first GBT instance still as a learning tool. You could think of this right here as a continuation of the course, right? At the grandest level. You do a minimum in Canvas so that when you do, you can then start taking on tasks here. And again, just to reiterate, right? These are learning tasks. And by the way, that's spot on, eh? You know, all of these ones are front-end bounties, the ones that are at the top of the list. I have a few that I'm drafting down here and will add, but all of these are about the front end. This is all about creating front ends that interact with Plutus, because whatever the exact arithmetic turns out to be, just think about this model, right? To instantiate GBTE, you need to go into a single Plutus compiler file and change a few values. You can use it without touching Plutus logic. And then once you do, you still have to be able to then use that in the context of a front end. So hopefully this course is emphasizing that part, right? Yes, Plutus is really important. It plays a role, but how much of a role? And there's not a final answer on that question yet, but I hope that there's a clear recognition that Plutus is not the whole thing, even though there's some Plutus bounties I'm really excited to put up here, and I want to take them. I'm writing ones that I want to take first, you know. So just to be clear, I'm going to be participating in this too, and jumping into these as they're posted. But if somebody beats me to it, incredible. So that context is really important. And to reiterate this, if there's one thing that I want to make sure everybody's clear about, it's that this is the first instance. We are deciding on the rules together for the first instance. And in the future, people are going to be able to decide on whatever rules they want for access. And the test of those rules is going to be, well, will people agree to them, right? I might make a GBTE in the future that has unfair and absurd rules. And nobody's even going to try to get a contributor token because they're like, man, you're crazy asking for this, this, or that. Right? That's the market in full effect. Anybody who says, hey, I want to be a treasury issuer, there's stuff I need done, is going to decide what the barrier to entry is. So why is that important? I think it's really important to think about here because, A, like we talked about earlier this week, less is better, right? It's easier to start from some essential baseline and then allow people to extend upon it than it is to try to do everything at once and then have to walk back different decisions. So when we look at this metadata right here, one way to think about it is, hey, is there something in this emerging schema that you can imagine wanting to get rid of someday? And if so, maybe it shouldn't be here, right? But to bring it back to this bit, listen, this first GBTE is going to be funded with gimbals from the initial pool and gimbal pool rewards. It will be great for those to be treated as public resources. And that's why I'm really glad you're all here, because there shouldn't be any individual person making these decisions. However, what if sometime I want to take my personal gimbals and get some really hard technical work done? I promise I will do this in the future. I'm going to spin up my own personal instance of the GBTE with my own personal tokens and say, hey, can anybody help me with these things? There's a high barrier for entry. You know, I'm going to need you to have a completion token, and I'm going to need to see evidence that you completed at least X, you know, at least 5 of these bounties or something, like whatever I decide. And I'm going to have a full right to do that because it's going to be my instance and I'm going to make the rules for that. And I hope that everybody here sees themselves doing the same thing. Maybe you'll make your own. A startup is going to come along and say, hey, we got $50,000 worth of dev work that needs to be done. But we have these requirements for people who even try to contribute. We ought to be able to deliver on that, right? Whatever their rules are. And we can show them all sorts of data to say, hey, of the data that exists, what data do you want to use? And whatever their answer is, we're going to run with that. And then if people do it, well, that was good data. If people don't, again, that's the market being in effect. Yeah, I'll pause there. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with the whole, backward compatibility conversation that we had. I suppose, yeah, I was just seeking the clarity on or some clarity on I suppose just the psychological connection of the barrier to entry and that kind of changing over time, and what it means to actually, what the artifact means, right? In this case, the token kind of thing, over time. So yeah, like unless we have a much better way to kind of like define things, or it's like Plutus V whatever then then that way I feel like as the market changes and as interest changes and as people coming on board to learn new things, have new interests and are solving new problems, which like fundamentally change, change over time. They evolve. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's just thinking about that, and hopefully they don't collide. But yeah, onward and upward.
Awesome. Yeah, so we do want these to be future proof, and everybody should assume that these will change over time. So let's share that assumption. And then keep in mind another thing. This is an intro PPBL course. I think a lot of people have already recognized that there's more advanced stuff to do. Mix wants to build, just a fully deep dive into Plutus, maybe covering everything that's covered in Plutus Pioneers, but from a PBL perspective. I would love to do a PBL course someday on just all the TX pipe tools, right? Or the Cardano transaction library, maybe learn some PureScript together. I think so another variable in all of this is future courses, which would then create their own credentials. Could this serve those? That's for us to decide. And what would be the requirements? I could imagine, I would love to use Giovanni's Web3 auth mechanism that he showed us at live coding a couple of weeks ago to grant people access to higher level courses in Canvas, right? If you have some earlier token for an entry level course, you can use that token to get access to this next course. So things like that, those are all questions coming our way. So with all that in mind, if anybody has further objections here, please share them by writing an issue or a Discord note, okay? But let's move on for now to the metadata and this idea of forward compatibility or future proofing. Is this metadata sufficient for telling a story right now? And does it feel lean enough to be forward compatible? What do you think?
Is the NFT quote unquote standard really a standard? Like, yeah, I don't know. That's just my
So,
opinion.
okay. Let's not, I don't want this part to derail us, okay? The reason this is here is because my understanding is that people would like an image on this token. And if people do want an image on this token, the way to make that image show up in people's wallets and on Pool PM is by using this metadata key. So yeah, if the goal is for there to be an image associated with it, I hope it's not controversial that there will be 721 data to accomplish that outcome. Fair?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I bring it up is because I mean, it could be reflected in any other way, but yeah, good point. Yeah, because it's just
Yeah.
key
We
value.
we could spend the next 5 hours debating the merits of the 721 standard. The simple fact is, if somebody wants to see an image of their NFT in their wallet, this is how you do it. So I'm really curious about this bit right here. Okay, this is an assumption. If people want images, here's how we will accomplish it. If somebody builds another way to do this before we mint these, fine, we'll use that. But I really want us, I want us to focus our conversation time on this bit right here. Is this sufficient to tell the story of somebody's completion of PPBL? Yeah. So right, Yuli, bringing back this question, right? Who is this metadata for? We have to think about who's interested in it and what they're trying to find out. So imagine yourselves in the shoes of somebody saying, hey, I heard about that PPBL completion token. I want to understand it. Is there anything missing from here that would be really helpful to include so that somebody who's looking at the metadata to help understand this can see it?
Sorry, my only concern will be that the mastery levels could be many of them. Like currently, they make sense, but they're still quite granular in terms of tree level. There could be, we could see whether all level trees could be combined into one, but given that they're building on top of each other, yes, I would like to know who completed the 302 and 301 today, but tomorrow it could just be the module tree itself together in one, possibly.
Yeah.
That we don't have many lines.
One of the things we talked about yesterday is if URL is even descriptive enough. So one way, Janti, to consider that is to say, hey, what if we call this like mastery policy and we just, or something like that? Is there a way by the naming of this key right here to tell somebody, oh yeah, we don't expect you to understand what this means, right?
Yes.
We don't want to put that on chain. It would just it would just lead to high transaction costs.
Yes, indeed.
We want to share some data here, and then this data is worthless if we don't provide people with a reference to learn about what that data means.
That data mean, yeah, they do. Yeah.
Dagwell, what's going on? What do you think?
Hey, how you guys doing, man?
Hey,
I would love to see like an issuer, like maybe like a timestamp, or if like we could like assign whatever we want to do to assign controller ID with a just to know like, hey, when was this? And I know that's built into some of the transaction data, but I think for me, it would make it more valid in my mind if I knew that I could actually talk to the person who issued the credit, and say, hey, is this valid? I'm thinking more of like validation later on. So when you send it through an API, just be able to say, yeah, that person did it. It's good.
good. Okay, so that's actually a really good point for everybody here to consider. Is the policy ID sufficient, right? So if for example, you go to a URL about this token where the policy ID is shared and mastery is described, is it enough for people to say, okay, I see that token has that policy ID. You can also see the issuance date, right? You can see the minting date of the thing. So all that's on chain. And to be clear, all of that information, right? Anything that's on chain, we can grab it and represent it in a front end. So a description on a front end of a contributor token, it'll reference the metadata, but it might also reference, right, the signing key from the minting not the signing key, right, but the pub key hash of the minter and the date that transaction happened. So think about that for a moment. That's worth pausing on. Is there anything that, yeah, maybe we could get it on chain, but there's a really good reason to also include it in the metadata? What do you think?
If we're going to use that for like a query or something, we could like actually query the field if we had it in metadata.
So this, here's the raw data for viewing escrow transactions. It's not formatted on purpose. This is just the raw data. So here's what we have in, for example, where's the metadata? Sorry, here it is. So here's a commitment, a bounty commitment transaction. And this is what's in the metadata. Want to identify which bounty, the hash of it, so we can verify what kind of transaction it was, and a timestamp in milliseconds, which is kind of unique and might be useful. And then for safety, for now, a contributor pub key hash. I'm 95% sure this, for example, is unnecessary, but I'm still testing out some edge cases to make sure we need it. But notice that this metadata doesn't say anything about who was contributing to this thing. And actually, you can see right here, contributor token is blank because this was the contributor token that didn't have a name on it. So if I scroll down a little farther, you can see that this one does have a contributor token. And so this information right here is drawn from the token metadata and not from, or sorry, not even the token metadata, the unit, right? This unit right here that you recognize from Cardano CLI view, for example, but not in the metadata, right? So it's possible to build front-end components that say, okay, I'm taking a little bit of this, I'm taking some information from a UTXO, and I'm repackaging that in a way that shows coherently, you know, I hope you recognize, like, if I can do this like this, it's easy to say contributor token, bounty ID, and type all in the same thing. We could also include the amounts. Here's the amount of gimbals, here's the amount of Lovelace in this commitment, for example. So I think it's entirely possible and probably even encouraged to use the on-chain data that already exists for all the things it's good for, and then include in metadata maybe the stuff that we can't get from the transaction. But that said, you know, even so, you can see me right here, including a contributor pub key hash, just because, like I said, there's a few edge cases that I still need to check. So I feel some uncertainty. So if there's some uncertainty that we can't get data we need on chain, we should include it here. What would be an example of that? Yeah, that's a good idea. So that's a really, right. So we could set up there's a few ways to think about that process, Yuli, but I think that's a really good idea. When Git commits are made for completing a bounty, how can we make a connection between the Git user's account and the contributor token they hold? And well, yeah, that's a really interesting topic for us to look at together. Keep thinking about that question, okay? So here's another, let's all walk away from this meeting with a few other questions in our head. But think about, is there data that needs to be here? I see course module. Hey, do you want to expand on that? Where would course module be, like at this level right here?
Yeah, no, it would be, I suppose, after, yeah, because I was looking at mastery levels and I was wondering, because there's kind of an assumption kind of inbuilt, like from a hierarchical standpoint, I feel like, you know, it would sort of go modules, and then within the modules you'd have like level of accomplishment, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. That might be accomplished just by changing this mastery levels. We could make this say, yeah, like module completion or something, or module mastery.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I was just thinking of the presentation and objects and the arrays.
I'll put up a few options for that in the next revision of this proposal. Okay, so bring questions about that. I'm recognizing we could take as long as we need for this. So I don't want to rush us to getting to a conclusion. So let's keep going, but let's also assume that people can keep sharing feedback here if you have a eureka moment. All right. We've kind of touched on this bit today. There are, as long as we keep the policy ID open, the metadata can be revised. We should expect that we will discover additional information to include in this metadata in the future. And the principle I'm operating from is better to add than to delete data. Okay, so the goal is for this to be sufficient, for us to be confident that these fields can be used moving forward, and to fully recognize that maybe fields will be added in the future. This is on me. I'm going to create this page, and this proposal cannot be finalized until everybody here has a chance to look at what's posted here. I just haven't had a chance to push that yet. These bits, I've skipped back and forth to a few of these points. So let's just do a survey of items 3 through 8 and think about some next steps. Nelson, what do you think?
Just before moving on to that part, did I hear you say that we are just using the 721 just for the images?
So we have to use the 721. I mean, yeah, okay. If we want images, 721 is the way to do that.
My follow-up question would be, how does the NFT marketplaces work? So if we are using 721, is anyone allowed to be put up their tokens for sale on a secondary market? And if that's the case, then if we don't use 721 and we don't have the image, then at least it won't be put up for sale. I don't know, just thinking about it.
It could, so that's a good point. So not including the 721 data would make it less likely that somebody would post their completion token on JPEG Store, for example. But the fact is, any token can be traded anytime, okay? And so even if people couldn't list these on JPEG Store because there's not an image, and that would absolutely make it less likely just for an NFT collector to try to get one, you could still trade these on any DEX. So we're not going to stop people from trying to sell these, but we should be thinking about, okay, what happens if they do? What happens if somebody sells these? Well, the new holder of that token has the ability to commit to a bounty. And what happens if that new holder commits to a bounty? Well, they either do it or they don't. If they do it, we'll kind of be laughing and scratching our heads, being like, okay, so this person took the course, they sold their token to this other person, and that other person, wow, they became a productive contributor. That's an interesting phenomenon that we can decide what to do with. The other possibility is that that new holder of the contribution token commits to a bounty and then never does anything about it. 30 days pass, the bounty expires, the issuer cancels the bounty, and now that contributor token is back in the ownership of the treasury issuer. So in my mind, I'm really interested in these real life dynamics, right? The native assets can be moved freely on the blockchain. That's actually a great feature of this protocol. But if they're moved, what does that enable? At worst, it enables somebody to lock up a bounty's worth of funds for a while, right? At worst, it allows somebody to lock up more than a bounty's worth of funds by going into Cardano CLI and locking those funds, right? And there's actually work we have to do to lock down that contract. And somebody could, a really malicious actor could buy a contribution token on an exchange, or just acquire one by any method, and they could lock all of the tokens in the treasury without datum in the bounty contract, therefore basically burning all of our funds. That would be a bad outcome, but that's as bad as it would get. And so one outcome there is, okay, with that in mind, maybe we don't put 1 million of anything in the treasury at first, right? Because this thing, there is a little bit of work to do in terms of locking down against those worst options. But first of all, like, here we are, right? That's we get to decide, and people here who hold these things are going to get to choose if they want to be that kind of actor, and they're also going to force us to continue building and making this thing more resilient. And yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely true to argue that selling could have greater consequences than that. And so it shows us that there's more building to do. And we can decide if there's certain things that mean we shouldn't do this until we feel good about it, let's do it. Gimbal Labs registration number, that could be cross-checked. Yeah, right. So these are the systems that we have to build in the long term, right? So I want to reiterate something from a couple of weeks ago. We are taking the opportunity to do something in a trusted environment, because the whole purpose of PBL, or the core belief behind project-based learning, is that the most effective way to learn is by doing stuff, okay? So the goal is to say, okay, well, we want this to be as safe and scalable and extendable as possible, but we also want to give ourselves the opportunity to do something so that we can learn as much as possible. So that's a risk to be taken, right? As a treasury issuer for this first one, I'm going to put my trust in people who complete the course. You earn one of these tokens, you're free to break the system. Curtis, what do you think?
As you were talking about all that, I had a couple of thoughts and trying to see how they might link into the metadata. It sounded like the first thought or initial thought of this contributor token is it gets locked into that bounty contract, right? So you can only do one at a time per contributor token or PPPL token. So somebody acquires many of them and they lock all of them. They could potentially, right, lock a significant amount of funds. So how can that be accounted for? But I don't think that relates to the metadata conversation. So I'll kind of try to keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
But when we do lock the contributor token into the bounty contract itself, I think it'd be really cool if we can implement SIP 25, make it a smart NFT, and have that bounty contract put like a stamp into the metadata of the token, so you kind of get a history of all the bounties that it was used and completed.
Yep, that is absolutely a good idea. So everybody here can either draft a bounty for that or try it. And like I said, you're exactly right. So we got to prioritize what we do. But absolutely, that's an example of a pathway that I hope somebody might follow. So Roberto says, could you include registration number metadata? Yeah, so that's another question, Roberto, similar to what Curtis is saying. There's all sorts of ways to extend this thing and build up the robustness of it. And for me, the purpose of building a robust system is so it can scale, right? There are definitely things that need to be implemented before I would feel comfortable using this system and giving to somebody I don't know at all a contributor token, right? It's even a risk. We all know each other for a couple months tops, you know, and here we are. And I'm going to, like I said earlier, I'm going to choose to trust this group not to do those things that would break this contract, and certainly not going to put so many tokens in the treasury at once that losing them because somebody just felt like locking them up forever did so, right? So there's some work with the contract to do, obviously, to make that impossible. And there's relying on the level of trust, again, with the goal of learning by doing. Why take these risks? Because the value of learning by doing, in my mind, outpaces the risk of whatever tokens will be in this initial instance. I know, I thought about you when I said that. You're not wrong. Sarah says, I think in the metadata, there should be something about how a student during the course, especially on the mastery levels, helped fellow students. Bingo. Okay. Another topic that your PPBL team has been talking about since May, probably 2 months before the course went live, is the role of mentorship. Mentorship is awesome. And a world where mentors are helping each other finish course materials, helping each other work through bounties. I want to live in that world. And there's a lot of people in the Cardano ecosystem actually working on mentorship. So I think representing successful mentorship with some kind of token or some kind of credential, absolutely, we have to do it. We have to do it. And not on this project, right? This project is about PPBL course completion. But why is it important to get this part right? Because if we do this part right, then we can turn our attention to these even better things like mentorship and peer-to-peer relationships. So I really hope, that's another example of an idea that's extremely dear to me. Okay, I want there to be an on-chain representation of who helped who. And I want people to be able to make a living as peer tutors. Okay, but I'm choosing to tackle that problem as a unique problem from this one, which is about course completion. Reading real world certificates, I love it. Metadata key completion. Yeah, Alex, I agree. What Curtis described should be a bounty. And so one of my hypotheses is that the best way to write bounties is to work on the application itself. And my hope is to prove that hypothesis. When people start working on some of these really basic bounties and they go into the code and they make things work, I hope they get all sorts of inspiration for saying, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? And I would love for anyone here to contribute further bounties to this system. Okay, so let's watch that very closely. And Curtis is already modeling that, right? Having an idea about a future bounty task. My invitation to everybody if you see something that could or should be done, try to go into this open repo right here. Remember, where's the link to GBTE? First instance. Oh, that's the visual link. Where's the repo? This is just, well, here, let's just do it this way. This of course is an open source repository. Just request edit access or request access if you don't have it yet and you want to contribute. And you'll see there's two folders here. There's a bounties folder. These are the ones that are live on the site right now. And then there's drafts here where I'm just getting ideas together and we'll push them when I'm satisfied with them. But everybody here is welcome to draft up a bounty and submit a merge request, okay? I might have questions about it, but I hope that this can become a thing where if you see something that needs to be done, you see the pathway towards suggesting that and even making a bounty out of it. Yeah, and Sarah, yeah, that argument for like why mentorship tokens, because they tell us something more than dev skills about a person. And I think that's brilliant. And I just want to reiterate, the reason we're not talking about those mentorship relationships right now is not that they're not important. Those things are even more important to me than this. But I've learned one thing in Cardano development. You got to do the first thing first, right? And so today we're trying this as a first thing. We got to get the PPBL course completion token right. Because as soon as we do, then we can focus on things like mentorship. And trust me, I can't wait. If anybody is sketching ideas for that, bring it. Let's talk about it. And I just want you to know that that is so important to me, that we have a way of people building up their on-chain reputation by supporting each other to learn new things. We're at time again, but here's what we still have to consider, right? I think hopefully numbers 3 and 4, I think I've circled back to these a couple times in the last 2 days. If you have questions about these, I'm just going to leave the issue board open, and I'm going to hold off on even saying what the deadline is for this. It can be open for a couple days, and there doesn't have to be a hurry. The urgency to get this done is so that people who are completing the course can start taking on these tasks, okay? But any deadline for this comes from us, so we get to do it right. We do need to work on the image bit. Curtis and Juan started a conversation in Discord and already shared some examples. I know you've been working on this, but if I can request, if a working group can self-form just to get this done, I will say yes to whatever you come up with. Okay, I love it that people are working on this. And part of this is, hey, should there be conditional rendering? And just thinking about how does that conditional rendering work, right? The number of different images we have multiplies the options by that much, right? And so if we decide we want images to have a color that's associated with some level of mastery, that's beautiful. It can absolutely be done. And it will only be done if somebody chooses to spend the time to accomplish that. So just keep that in mind. This is a brilliant idea. Is it more important than everything else you might do? That's for each of us to decide. This process, please comment on this in the issues. Naming, think about this. This is a topic that was raised yesterday, and please be thinking about it. Is a token name, maybe with a format like this, sufficient to identify one contributor from another, or do we need the metadata to include information? I could go either way. We just have to decide. And then querying, yeah, this is great. So the short answer to this question is yes, right? In order to query all certificate tokens from Gimbal Labs, you just need to know the policy IDs for each one of them. And then any front end can provide a view of that information. You know, and for now it would be a single policy ID. It would be the policy ID for this token. But maybe in the future, there would be multiple course completion tokens. And it's trivial, really, to add additional policy IDs to a query and then to present an overview of outstanding credential tokens on a web page. Now, I can stick around. So if people want to keep going on this, we'll keep recording. And if people want to talk through anything from, you know, well, 1 through 8, please stick around with questions. Otherwise, I'll post the recording whenever we finish up today. People can catch up on everything, and I'll post some next steps in Discord later today. Y'all, thank you. This is legit work, and I want to reiterate one more thing from yesterday. Maybe you'll lead a conversation like this someday. I hope you will. Right? We are just initializing systems right here, but access tokens, treasuries, and escrow systems. The reason we're building these is so that other people can pick these things up. And I can imagine, like, if I tried to have a conversation about credential tokens in City Hall, in the city where I live, there would be a lot of opinions, right? So all of us should be thinking ahead to that future where there's different groups who have work to be done, who want to fund it, who want to think about how do we give people access to contributing. And there's going to be, I think there's going to be a real market for facilitating this kind of conversation. And I hope that comes across loud and clear today. So if you got to jump, we can call it a day here. But if anybody wants to stick around, please do. If there's anything you want to think out loud about here, we can do that. Yeah, hey.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to quickly share some ideas, or the idea that I referenced at the beginning, just so that I don't sort of leave people hanging. Not that I don't think there's a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, what about that thing that you said? Yeah, so is it okay if I quickly share my screen and sort of talk through it?
Most definitely, thank you.
Yeah, I don't seem to have permissions. Do I need?
You should. Yeah, you should have permission.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry. All right, there'll be two parts to this video, I guess. I don't know. I have multi-share. Oh yeah, you got it. Okay, good.
Is that showing now?
It's coming through. Hasn't loaded yet. Let me see.
Okay.
Come on, Starlink.
I'm
Let's
right next
go.
to it. So
I don't see it yet. Can anybody else?
stop share, pause share. Yeah, I'm sharing. Right. Yeah, let me know.
Oh, we got you. Yep, there it is.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay. So yeah, this is just, I suppose, going back to the images that we spoke about earlier. Wait. Okay. So I'll just hop on to to get up first. Yeah. So one of the things that came to mind, that are somewhat related to what I'd been thinking about previously, is representing it from a 3D standpoint, representing ideas. Okay, this is not gonna work. I need to change it back. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so in this case, it's well, the inspiration actually started out a while back. Something I've been meaning to do in the back of my mind is take on this idea from Apple that they started years ago with the Apple Watch, where they have these badges, which I think are pretty neat, and they sort of like represent similar to like real life enamel pens. And so yeah, you could sort of imagine having different visualizations or sort of different um iconographically reproduced or pictographically reproduced ideas, whether it's just a number or an environment, etc. Because as we think further down the line, things like infrastructure, like from a dandelion standpoint, like it'd be nice to sort of have different visualizations of stuff in this regard. um so the initial sort of base thing was kind of coming from there and wanting to do something along those lines. And so one of the neat things about this is if you on the watch, I'm not sure about any other environment, but on the watch, if you tap on it, it flips around and you're able to see the sort of the concave backside of the watch. And on there, I was gonna add one of those images to illustrate, but it's just it's a simple it's a simple okay, in this case obviously I've created this hollow thing, but in that case it's a simple sort of shiny metallic surface which has text on it, right? And that text, you can be able to have a whole bunch of different stuff represented within that text. And one of the awesome things about this is because is if it's output as a GLTF, technically what ought to be able to happen is you can be able to swap out certain things, like for example the text in it. So one can imagine or envisage having a single reference point, right, of the artwork, say, and again this is just a quick thing, like with the gimbal G and stuff like that. But yeah, one can imagine having on the backside a representation of whatever contextually is relevant. Whether it's the course provider or leader or dates, times, etc., in a dynamic way where you're just basically referencing the main GLTF, and then you're sort of swapping out the text because basically GLTFs are represented in JSON. I don't know if you actually look into the uh, the raw representation of a GLTF. For those of you who don't know, GLTF is a 3D file form. It's commonly referred to as the PNG equivalent. PNG in images or JPEGs in images is 3D equivalent kind. And so here, just taking that sort of hexagonal idea, in this case, in the middle, it's just a G. And again, I apologize for the quality of the mesh. It's really rough. But it kind of, yeah, I did it quickly today earlier. Just quickly represent, the idea here, where, as I said, going from the inspiration from earlier, you can envisage, different different sort of styles of pictograms created in the middle, but hopefully preserving the hexagon shape. And what's cool is with hexagon shape, you can sort of tile them and stuff. And what's in the middle can, the image itself can actually, or the pictogram itself can be different things, right? So for example, for Plutus, maybe it's the P sort of representation of the Plutus logo. for dandelion, could be, the actual dandelion flower, etc. So basically, it's quite rich. And what's good about this, in addition, oh God, whoa, hang on, give me 1 second. Call you later. Apologies. I've never actually been interrupted like that, which is weird. Um, I am a lonely person. Yeah. So one of the things that's cool about this is, it's not just 3D, because 3D is fun, but it's also kind of, it's future proof in a way. So you can, within today's environment, Web 2, you can be able to have, you can be able to um visualize GLTFs, in browser. Yeah, and at the moment, different um, marketplaces, for lack of a better word, actually have the option to represent 3D stuff. And one, just to hop back to what I was saying about NFTs and the 721. I think with the potential of what, these with what bounties and just learning in general can represent, I think, one of the awesome things here is the possibility of being able to change a paradigm in how stuff is being represented, right? So, if the only thing from a query standpoint is a 721, which in my opinion is somewhat of a lazy, sort of execution, which was just stolen from Ethereum. In this context, we've got a richer, environment where we can be able to have things like mime type, represented within the metadata. And so as anyone on chain, whether a marketplace or, a gallery or whatever, is querying the chain, is able to, say, hey, it's not just at the top level where, is there 721 or it's not. You're able to actually, like, pass through a whole bunch of different things. And if there is from a mime type, so mime type here, basically meaning a key value pair, which would indicate um, that there's a presence of media, right? Whether it's video, music, a sound file, or 3D file, um, then you could then sort of push that further down to the query. And also from a filtering standpoint and just from a query standpoint, I think it makes it a little bit more elegant and a little bit more efficient. But anyway, yeah, so I just quickly want to illustrate this. And yeah, I think what's cool about this, in addition, is you can be able to basically create an environment where artists, you can have artists, or open up the environment or the opportunity for different artists to actually come on board, and have and contribute to making or starting the sort of market or flywheel effect of a market for 3D assets, because those are the future, right? It's not so much 2D, but more 3D, and maybe adding on like stories and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of it for, yeah, that was just it at a higher level. Where's the thing? Oh, and actually, just quickly before I wrap up on this, if you guys are still there, um, anyone, if for any of you who have worked within 3D, you'll know that the 3D world is a bit um, weird when it comes to interoperability. So I think creating the incentive for people to actually engage within it, I think it would help from a interoperability standpoint. Because right now, like this, so there are two different standards, somewhat kind of competing. One's GLTF, which I'd spoken about earlier before, and then the other is USD or USDZ, or the different finishes to that, or different suffixes, but USD, basically universal scene description. In this particular case, like, I tried to convert the previous, like what you saw earlier, to USD, and it doesn't really do that good of a job. Most of the time there are a lot of errors, as you can see. on the side here, it says, error number 1, show details, and usually the error messages as usual aren't really that helpful. It's like, oh, unexpected error occurred. Please fix any other errors and try again. And yeah, reloading that just doesn't really actually do much. But anyway, yeah, I just quickly want to show that. And one final thing is, as you can see, I attempted to quickly represent like different metallic colors. So obviously, I use a different bit of software, Nomad, on the iPad to do the shading. So actually, what the border that I just added, which is supposed to be bronzy, is supposed to be more metallic, and not as plastic as that. So again, going back to the idea of 3D, and it's not like, the need for, to have some minds within that space, working on interoperability, I think would actually be a net positive to that. So yeah, you can have sort of representation of, different materials, whether it's shiny metallic or sort of plastic or glassy type stuff. And yeah, that's that. Hopefully hopefully I've not been talking to myself this whole time. Let me try and
Dude,
find
it's
the
inspiring. That's
windows. I
awesome.
think it's here.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Thank God. God.
Well, and Dagwell's inspired too. What do you say, D?
Yeah.
Bro, I'm on it so much. Like, I've been waiting for this not really waiting, but we don't have that level of skill, but we threw like a 3D in it for we were helping someone launch like a sweatshirt. So we created a 3D model, of the sweatshirt that you can like, spin around, and it shows what it's gonna look like. And when I saw you do that, and I realized the level of skill and texture and lighting and shadows, and like, I didn't do it, but what I did do was I did incorporate it into the metadata for it to be displayed. And something else that I just wanted just to spotlight, and I think you touched on it, and I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but what we did was we on the first part, we had the GLB file, which was the sweatshirt that you're going to purchase. And then under that, we had a launch video, MP4. And we just put that video type MP4 JSON file in the metadata. And then under that, we had, we just had their logo in the GLB. And I'm not saying that everyone needs that much, but what I am saying was, you come into like to representing tokens, you could stack them pretty much, and that could be kind of like certifications. And then also earlier to the metadata, something that we did for like when we were just working on like an identity solution. And what we put in the metadata is we would put the block, the transaction, and the key, to where we would store the information, so that way when to look in that key, and just kind of keep like a mobile dictionary, kind of what you guys do with, I might have got the idea from here last year watching, but definitely kind of what we do, is like keeping like a library type thing, to where you can just have the minimum amount on the 721, not to bog it up, and just like, to verify full credentials, go to key 1631 during block 107532, and you can get the whole story. But yeah, I love the GLB, man. It's so awesome, bro. Just amazing, man. So awesome.
Yeah, guys, awesome. Hey, what were you gonna say?
Sound was breaking up so much during Dagwell's contribution, but yeah, thanks for the contributions and stuff. Yeah, could you throw a link? Because right towards the end, I feel, I think you mentioned a link to your GLB/GLTF explorations. Yeah, I'll be really interested in just checking out. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of value there. you know, to tap into 3D, because and again here, you know, on a lower level where, you know, there's efficiencies to, you know, to it, in that, you know, you can again just reference one, like, you know, from like reference inputs, right? So when it comes to visualizing the thing, you can just point to like the original thing and then have offsets, right? In this case, the offset would be like yeah, the text, for example. Or, you know, you could have even other offsets which are like, you know, changing, you know, the what's the word, the original file, right? So, you know, again, going back to, you know, being lean in the context of on chain, and having, you know, as minimal data as is required, and also from the standpoint of custody, right? Because yes, it's awesome to have heavier things exist on IPFS, etc. Like, for example, within the 3D world, it will make a lot of sense um, to have like mesh, 3D meshes, right, which are a lot heavier to exist on so on things like IPFS, or you know, other sort of, you know, file storage environments, decentralized. But there are like key things, like for example the amateur, right, which could exist on chain. So it's a similar thing here, where, you know, from a custody standpoint, because you know, you need persistence, especially with something like an accreditation, or sort of, you know, its representation. If, yeah, you have, say, the hashes and everything on chain, if you could, you know, do something to the equivalent from a visual standpoint, I think it's worth you know, it's worth giving some consideration to. Oh, yeah, thanks. I'll check out the pool PM link. Thanks, Daggle.
Yeah, not a problem, man.
Is that a hand up again, Dominic?
Thank you. Check my Zoom etiquette.
Check. Hey, so I love it. I mean, if this provides an opportunity to set up a space to play with these ideas moving forward, I think that's an incredible outcome. And so the two things I would ask for is like, hey, what scope could be achieved immediately, right? Could we start a process very same way as the metadata about the course? Is there something that we can put out there that would allow us to learn about this, try some ideas, and not close off any opportunities for the future? And if the answer is yeah, let's do it, right? Let's go for it. But if you can manage that scope so that these things are ready within a certain amount of time, let's do it. What that certain amount of time is, you know, when it comes to the deadline for making decisions about this completion token, for me, the most important stakeholder is the person who finishes the completion requirements and wants the completion tokens so they can start working on bounties, right? And so as soon as the first people have met those requirements and have requested tokens, they say, yep, I'm ready. I don't want to make them wait. Okay, so let's prioritize that group. That hasn't happened yet, so we have time, but also we haven't put out that process yet. So let's assume that, you know, looking at the grade book, there's still a couple of more mastery levels that a few of the highest flying students want to finish. But let me talk to those people and say, hey, when might you think you're going to finish by, and let's use that to create that deadline. Juan, what's going on?
Yeah, James. I mean, hey, this is awesome work. I love it. I wanted to talk to the group about that specifically, the deadlines and the timing, and if this work that Aid is doing will be integrated with this iteration, or or the future. But if it is for this one, well, we just answered part of those questions. But then if it is for this one, it will be great if we, Coris and A and I kind of, exchange ideas of how can integrate what is already been done on the work that you are doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually just typing typing out the response to this.
Super.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I added in the what's it called, in the issue of my comment in the issue, I was like, yeah, I like the the interesting stuff that has been and the conversations that have been going on in Discord. Given the time constraint, I think to do the 3D aspect well, and personally, just my personal time commitment, living living in the wilderness right now, I don't think I'll be able to do a good enough job for this iteration, but for iterations further down the line, most definitely, because this is something that I've been thinking about as well, and it's aligned to things which I want to do. So I'm inspired or incentivized and motivated to to do it. So yeah.
Awesome. Alex, what are you thinking?
Well, first of all, A did an amazing job. Nice. It reminded me of some things I did before with 3D modeling, and nice looking and super cool. Well, it seems like we should kind of keep it tight on the smart contract idea. Yeah, and I was actually having difficulties with the CLI recently. It behaves like it doesn't want to work on my computer. Maybe I think trying CS Cardano Sharp CLI for smart contract testing. What do you think about that? I can send transactions and on testnet with CS Sharp, yeah? With CS CLI. Okay, and I'm gonna then try to work with the CS CLI because it doesn't seem to, it should be more robust. It doesn't connect to the chain in a way that Cardano node does. And the other thing is, just was talking to Randall, and like, do you know any approach to automating smart contract build and testing?
Oh man. Okay, so that's the billion-dollar question. Yuli, see you real soon. Sidan, his Discord name is whatever, is playing around with automation of compiling those Plutus scripts.
Oh, awesome. Can you send me his Discord?
Yeah, he's talking about it in one of the Discord channels. Let me ping you. I'm just going to ping you in the bottom of that channel. So
okay, super nice. Yeah, awesome.
Do that right now before I forget, though.
Thank you so much, because I think this is the one bottleneck that we have.
Alex. Yeah. Wait, are you not in Plutus PBL? Hold on.
Not in the Discord server?
No, do you not have that role?
Oh, do you think so?
I'm looking. Like, I don't know. You're going to be on my shit list if you're not, though. Come on.
Well, come on. I don't want to be on your shit list.
No, I got you. No, I'm kidding. Okay. You should be now. Oh, that's why you couldn't see. Oh, dude, I just opened up a whole bunch of Discord channels for you.
Yeah, I see. 4 actually.
Yeah, here. So hit that up. It's
whatever. I see the guy.
Yeah, it's critical. This is critical though, right? Yeah. Think about everything we know about parameterized validators grows exponentially in value if we are able to automate that compiling step. That just blows the lid off of our possibilities, and it's so important. I haven't yet had time to see a solution for that, at least on the existing Plutus stack without the PAB. That makes it easy. But I'm so glad he's looking at it. And if you're trying to figure that out, I would like to put more time into that. So I'll follow you where you go.
Absolutely, man. I will I think it's we should really work on that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
see,
no, that opens up a lot of possibilities. Keep in mind, CSCLI, it may not do everything. And I know Kyle is still learning some of the contract interactions. Keep in mind that in some ways, the mesh React front end might provide the most accessible way to interact with a contract. So if your Cardano CLI or your node is not syncing, you can still compile a contract and then try to build a working transaction in the front end.
Yeah, true. Okay.
And I'll help you with that. If you want to do a session just looking at that to test something, you bring the contract that's ready to go, and I'll try to help you build that thing out.
Awesome. Okay, then I think, yeah, I will need then just to find a simple, I think always succeeds contract will do from Plutus Pioneer. And then what I need to do to figure out how to test it in
well, study just already study in here. Let me give you these two links. So first of all, study in you already have the PPBL course 2 repo with all of the all of those contracts, always succeeds and more there, right? But in the front end template, you'll see that we are interacting with the basic faucet contract. So go take a look at that. And then look in the GBTE front end. Here, I'll send you a more specific link to this one. Look specifically at how the transaction is built right here. And you can learn a lot about what boilerplate is necessary just by looking at that last example. And here, let me give you the more specific link to the overall front end.
I just don't see where you send these links.
Oh, they're in Zoom. Sorry. I'll send them to you on Discord too.
Oh, thanks so much, man, because Zoom is gonna lose them.
Right.
I'm just gonna copy them myself, don't worry.
Okay.
Copy message.
Components, faucet. This one is where the transaction is actually built. Yeah. Here's one more.
Okay. I have 4 links in total.
Yes. Yeah. The last 2 are the most important ones. Study those and see where everything's imported from and how the pieces are put together. But both of these work. Remember, they're still V1 contracts. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Just I need a little bit a text note about that. So V1 contracts.
Yeah.
Code to study to understand automation, automatic build and testing smart contracts.
I gotta say, I feel like I have a superpower once I can build the front end, because right, you go from doing all that building on Cardano CLI to having a button you can press to interact with your contract, and it's
to be honest, I don't understand. You know, like in Cardano CLI, you can just have a script with everything in there, and then you, instead of pressing the button, you just run one command.
That's true. That's like pressing a button. You're
well,
right.
it's you know, everyone has their own preferences.
We got all those scripts too. I can send you those links.
I know where they are. Don't worry. I've studied your code, man, quite a bit in the last days. I wasn't in the online conversations for the obvious reasons, but I could study the code offline. You know, I saw the scripts that you made, awesome, like with all the variables inside, and I was just thinking before, like I remember we had a session, or somebody was like, they was looking in the script, and then from the script they were copying text into the command line and running it. I was like, why don't you run the freaking script? You know?
Well, that was one of the first videos I ever made during the Lobster Challenge when smart contracts were first going live. I made a video just about doing the Lobster Challenge without the pre-prepared script so we could actually see what was going on. You got to do it once or twice, but then you don't want.
No, it was just recently on the live coding sessions when I saw it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
somebody also said like, why don't we just write scripts for that? And it was like, yeah.
why don't you take your training wheels off your bike? You know, it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
question.
Yeah.